So thank you everyone for joining us today, and thank you Gautam, Veena. Today we're going to talk a little bit about financial wellness and how to use technology to empower it in the employed workforce of India. So I'll start off with a very foundational question for Gautam. Gautam, you've been in the people management and the HR fraternity for over 3 decades now. And the definition of financial wellness has evolved. So would love to get your perspective on how have you seen financial wellness, its meaning for the employed workforce, actually evolve with time?
Thank you. I think 3 decades sounds like 100 years. But, if you really look back, the whole concept of financial wellness earlier was all about retirals, right? So when somebody talked about financial wellness, it was about how does one spend, how does one save, how does one manage and plan finances once you come to retirals. Even if you look at the government of India today, right, the entire structure around financial wellness is around PF, around ESIC, or let's say employee pension schemes. There used to be superannuation and gratuity. They're all focused around the retiral mindset. But I think with the multi-generational workforce that has really come in, the whole concept of financial wellness has really changed. And one of the big changes that have happened is that a lot of wellness today is about the now and the present rather than just about the future, right? So I think the biggest thing that has happened is that financial wellness today gets defined as financial security and also the freedom to choose at this point in time for the present as well as for the future, right? And interestingly, when you look at financial literature, right, or you look at financial education, 90% of that education today in India and in the US is all skewed towards retirals, right? So there is a shift now that's happening to say, how do we look at financial literacy in today's context so that we help people manage their finances much better? I think the other part of financial wellness that has also come in is this whole concept of behavioral finance. This subject has come in very strongly. And behavioral finance actually says that while man is a rational animal, right, a lot of decisions he takes is based on imperfect information, or he makes choices for himself which are not the right choices, right? So, for example, we all know about weight loss, right? We know how to diet, right? But we still don't follow those structures. So, behavioral science is now coming into financial wellness, and that is making a big difference to the whole concept and, definition of financial wellness.
Thank you for that, Gautam. On that note, I think one thing that's quite evident is that financial wellness as a topic, especially for employers, is increasingly gaining importance. I'd say more so in the recent past and probably fueled by the last 2 to 3 years of the pandemic as well. Would love to understand from the both of you, right, why today should employers, or why today is it becoming increasingly important for employers to pay attention to financial wellness and actually enable it? Why is it so important?
So I just like to talk about 6 trends that are happening, or 6 things that are happening on a macroeconomic level. I think first of all, if you look at the whole consumer price index, right? The consumer price index is somewhere hovering around 7.8, 7.2. And these are the official numbers. We know unofficially, right, the inflation is much higher than that. Right, if you look at employment rates, both rural employment rates and urban unemployment rates, they are hovering between 8 to 10%, right? RBI has a target of inflation which was earlier 2 to 4%. That they have shifted from 2 to 6%. It's a very large range for a central bank to take. It itself indicates that inflation is actually galloping away. So we have inflation, we have unemployment figures which are rising. We also have another thing that we've just come out of the pandemic, and the pandemic has actually impacting a lot of people's savings, right? I was at the plant the day before yesterday, and I was talking to the HR manager there, and he said, we had 2 COVID cases in the family, and he said that has literally wiped out half my savings of the last 20 years. So I think that has been another factor for people have to go back and recoup their savings. And the other thing is that if you look at organization wage structures, right, organizations are moving away from fixed pay, moving more into variable pay and LTIPs, right? So the variability is another area where, there is not a steady stream of money coming in every month, but it's more at the end of the year or end of half year or end of the quarter, as the case may be. And last but not the least, if you also notice what the government is doing, right? The government is slowly and steadily increasing the retirement age, right? It used to be earlier 58, they're moving it to 60, and now state governments have now started this pitch of moving from 60 to 62. right? Clearly indicating the need for people to work longer because there's not enough savings happening.
Yeah, just to add, we are all aware that 80% of our workforce in India um, live paycheck to paycheck, right? And because of their poor sense of wealth management, and also lack of discipline in terms of saving, and also the kind of, interests they spend on. At the end of the day, there is a cash crunch, and they're not able to fend for themselves, right, on a rainy day. We have seen that happen during the pandemic. The disruption caused a lot of financial stress amongst the workforce, right? So at Sila, the organization that I work with, we strongly believe and truly believe that the overall well-being of our employees is the cornerstone to uh, the the work culture that we have built. Sila is one of the fastest growing facility management organizations in India, and it is our responsibility towards our employees, which is about 15,000 plus, spread across the country in different geographies, coming from different economic backgrounds, to give them an ecosystem where there is a security net built, so that they feel that the organization is taking care of them and helping them to manage their finances in a better way. So yes, it is very important as employers to cater to the financial well-being of our employees.
I think also very interestingly, Veena, one of the aspects that you touched upon is also to taking care of the employees' well-being, but understanding that for most of the workforce in India, the employer is the first port of trust. So enabling financial wellness at that port of trust is really where you can make the difference. And it's also the reason why, because it's not been done in a very aggressive manner historically, a lot of workforce today still struggle from a financial wellness perspective.
Right.
Just, building on that a little bit, Sila as an organization, very workforce heavy, very, very human centric, does a lot on the benefits side,
Right.
is very employee focused, right? And I know that you all have looked at benefits across the spectrum, across
Absolutely.
categories,
Yeah.
and financial wellness being one, right? What in your opinion really is the best way to tackle financial wellness? Because it's such a broad topic with so many different angles and nuances to it.
Right.
Where do you find is the right solution in how organizations should think about solving this?
Sure. So we need to look at the financial well-being in a more holistic manner, right? And I would actually split it into two different aspects. One is where you are giving access or empowering your employee to gain access to his or her own funds, money, to kind of cater to his emergencies or immediate need of money, right? So it so happens that many a times our employees reach out to us for advances, salary advances, right? So historically, what we have experienced is there were months when employees, about 2-3 employees reached out to us. Then that number gradually increased month on month, and then we realized that the need for salary advances was growing amongst employees. And there was a reason to it, because typically an employee would reach out to families and friends for the immediate need. But then there was a matter of pride and ego also, right? Or would reach out to a money lender and, end up spending on the interests, right? To negate that and to ensure that there is de-risking, they started reaching out to the organization for help. But when the volume started increasing, it became difficult for us to kind of cater to that aspect, right? And the second one was, it's just not about empowering your employees to gain access to their money. Most importantly, we need to also ensure that they understand how to go about spending and saving. Basically, the spend management, wealth management needs to be driven across the organization. And we needed to ensure that these knowledge sessions are disseminated amongst the employees. So there was a holistic approach that we had to kind of garner. And that is when I think Jiffy happened, right? So the timing was right because we were unable to cater to the kind of volumes that was coming in from the employees, and we needed to establish a safety net, a good ecosystem for our employees who could rely on, a trusted resource, and who better than the organization itself, right, and its vendors. And that's when Jiffy happened, and with their earned wage access product and the tools, we were able to cater to that aspect as well. So we could streamline the entire process at our end.
I just want to add one point, and I'm going back to the years when I was with India's largest cement company as a CHRO, and we had around 40,000 workforce, and then with JSW where we had 85,000 workforce. And one of the guiding principles I've realized is that the credibility of the HR function really gets tested in emergencies and exigencies, right? If we are able to support our folks, our workmen, our employees, especially at the junior level in the large workforce consistently, right, then there's a big difference that can come in. And only working with, partners like Jiffy makes a big difference, because an organization by itself is unable to do this and take it forward.
Yeah, so I think on that note, Gautam, one of the things that I know you have, gone quite in depth into is understanding how technology can actually move the needle with regard to financial wellness, right, in a much more meaningful manner. And, really talks about understanding the personalization aspect of technology and then how they can empower that workforce right at the onset, make them independent financially, and then allow them to sort of build on that for their future, right? Would love to understand, for you to share with the audience a little bit around how technology plays a pivotal role in that aspect.
So, I'm beginning to realize now that people and technology are actually parts of the same coin as far as change management is concerned, right? Because if you want to manage change, there is an element of behavioral science and there is an element of technology which has to come together. The other shift that's happening is that the ratio of HR people in companies today, earlier used to be a healthy ratio, 1:80 or 1:100. That ratio actually is going to 1:250, 1:300, right? And because of that, there is a heavy reliance now to move from high touch to high tech, right? So we have to look at, technology to enable this whole thing. And how does it really happen, right? It happens, when you build a technology framework which has a user interface, right, which makes it very easy at the front end for people to use and have access to the products or the policies that you bring in place. On the back end, you have to have a strong employee insights or analytics engine, right, which is supported by AI and ML, which actually drives the entire process, whereby you try to personalize, as you call it, hyper-personalization of that interaction, so that for employee X, he's able to, depending on his risk appetite or his savings or spendings or his financial wellness habits, the nuances or the impact and inputs he gets is very different from somebody else. Or for example, depending on the life cycle of the individual, right, somebody who's a baby boomer versus somebody who's a millennial, the kind of interactions would be very, very different, right? So how do you personalize this is only possible through technology. Individually, we can't have somebody sit in the canteen and do this exercise for you, right? You will go nuts doing that whole exercise. And the other element that comes in is this whole new concept in technology called digital nudging, right? So digital nudging means how do you nudge an employee, right, to take the right decisions, right? How do you nudge him through SMS, through emails, or through certain behavioral reinforcements that makes him move towards the right habits of spending, saving, and also planning, right? And research in the US, right, has shown us that digital nudging can actually increase an employee's savings by 15%, right, which is a very large number, right? So more and more as we go across, technology and behavior is beginning to integrate, and I think that's where the whole focus will come.
So I think, one of the, all of this is really great to understand, right? And I think everyone's depth on the topic obviously varies across organizations, across leaders, etc. We often get asked a very important question, right? Whether it's from corporates or HR leaders, etc., on why should I provide financial wellness, right? What's in it for me, right? Because the benefit is not necessarily, today, not necessarily tangible immediately. The second aspect, financial wellness as a concept is novel, which is, an extension, or they view it as an extension of insurance, right? So it's still a fairly novel concept, which is not completely ingrained in the corporate or HR panels across India yet, right? And I often get asked this question of why? Why should I offer it to my employees? Veena would love your views as someone who has adopted financial wellness tools, Jiffy and others, on why do you think it's important for HR leaders to view this as an urgency versus a good to have?
Okay. I'll break it into two, okay? One would be from an employer's perspective, and two, it will be from an employee's perspective. As an employer, how does it help, right? When you know that your employees are being provided this kind of a safety net, a secure place, a reliable resource, and tools to kind of manage their, finances, it leads to better productivity because the person's, stress levels are low, right? Retention becomes a great pitch in this case, right? And we will also be able to attract the right talent because for people, at the end of the day, it matters that they belong to a good ecosystem which will help them manage their finances as well, right? As an employee, what they feel is that, they are being taken care of, right? So net, I think it is a win-win situation for both the employer and the employee. And I think Jiffy has played a big role for us to kind of help our employees across the board to manage their finances. Just to add, it was surprising when we launched. We really didn't know what would be the uptake, but now it's 50% plus uptake. And the other surprising factor was employees who come from a slightly better, salary bracket also are availing this facility. Of course, the purposes would be very different.
We've been asked this question, multiple times before, and let me share a little bit around, of our learnings here. So we are, live with many corporates. Many have very young workforce, and I'm sure Veena from Silla can also validate this, right? Less than 5% of use cases today are towards lifestyle requirements, right? So less than 5% of users actually avail of this service for frivolity. The second aspect of this product is today, the reality of the millennial and the Gen Z population that is very high on lifestyle is that if they can't get it from you, it's not stopping them to go externally, right? So I want a phone, I take an EMI, I pay 3%, I pay 4%, whatever it is, right? Or I borrow from my friend and family. That behavior is not going to stop them from actually indulging in high-cost credit or having, lending outstandings with friends and family. So the difference here is, I would say, is that it plugs that gap in a cost-efficient manner. So they're not stuck with a very high leakage on a month-on-month basis, which goes out traditionally to high-cost credit. And instead, they can use that, and you encourage that through a gamified manner to actually invest the leakage that they would normally lose in these purchases into savings tools and products. So that's how you tackle that behavior. And then the third aspect is, because we have a very customized rule engine, we actually provide this service as well based on certain filters within an organization, right? So tenure, department, salary bracket. That also allows organizations to put controls on what kind of behavior they want to encourage and what kind of loyalty they want to reward. So I think these are the three aspects to, in short, answer that question. Thank you. So I think time's up, but thank you everyone for attending, and thank you Gautam and Veena for joining us on the panel.
Thank you.
Thank you.